Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii, Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Carissimi beloved in Christ, welcome to this broadcast Mass on this, as we said, the second day of the Octave of Epiphany. Epiphany in the Church's calendar ranks immediately after Easter and Christmas as one of the most important feasts of the Church's liturgical year. And it has long, since it has ever been offered and celebrated, had an octave. Remember that the purpose of an octave is for us to celebrate for 8 days this great feast. And invariably, we will be hearing the same Mass, apart from Sunday, the Feast of the Holy Family. Otherwise, the octave of Epiphany, the daily liturgy, will be the same each day. So I will probably not repeat the readings in English going forward from this point. It might be a bit tedious to hear them repeated every day. There is so much, as I said yesterday, for us to reflect upon in this wonderful celebration of Epiphany. Yesterday, particularly, our attention was focused on the wise men, the Magi, the 3 kings. But Epiphany, of course, celebrates and commemorates not only the visitation of the Magi and the revelation of the Christ child to the world, the wise men representing the Gentile nations, but Epiphany also commemorates the baptism of the Lord and, thirdly, his revelation in the performance of his first miracle, which you may recall was at wedding at Cana in Galilee. So these 2 other themes are also commemorated during Epiphany tide. And if you follow the Divine Office, the Roman Breviary, you will find reflected in there each day more of these other themes of Epiphany, the baptism of the Lord and the wedding at Cana, than the Mass, which focuses mostly on the revelation to the world of the Christ child to the Gentiles. We reflected yesterday on the wise men themselves, where they had come from, why they had come. Let us consider today the 3 famous gifts that they brought: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, brought, of course, as a sign of kingship. As a sign of kingship. Gold, of course, is the most precious metal that humans treasure. And in many ways could be said to be representative of the material world, or at least all that is best, we might say, of the material world. Gold we often associate with kings. Kings, of course, we often associate with riches, great treasuries, golden crowns, of course, but as well, great power. Now there is here, of course, a slight irony. As we've been reminded in the Gospel, the wise men first went to Jerusalem and quite probably expected to find the newborn king of the Jews in the capital of Israel, i.e. Jerusalem. Jerusalem, of course, being not just the capital of Israel, but representatively heaven on earth for the Jewish religion. So the wise men may well have thought, well, surely the newborn child, we will find him in Jerusalem. But of course, he is not there, much to their consternation and that of Herod's. Instead, he who is born the King of the Jews, he who is the Messiah, he who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, is not to be found in a beautiful palace clothed in purple silk, but instead to be found wrapped in swaddling bands, lying in a manger in a small other town, Bethlehem. Some might ask, why is it that the Magi go to Jerusalem instead of straight to Bethlehem? Why did the star, presumably, why did the star not lead them directly to Bethlehem? We're here, of course, because the wise men were also proclaiming the arrival of the newborn king. They were declaring to the heavenly city of Jerusalem, they were declaring to the people of Israel that the Messiah had been born, that the Christ had been born. And of course, the fact that he was not born as a son of Herod, the fact that he was not born in the royal palace, the fact that he was declared born by Gentiles would, of course, cause some consternation, would have made the point that A, the Messiah had been born, but two, Israel, or rather personified in Jerusalem, and certainly represented by Herod, were not worthy. Not worthy, not yet ready to receive the Messiah. Now, later on, of course, some 32 and a bit years later, the Messiah does enter Jerusalem and is hailed as the son of David. He is greeted with palm branches. He is welcomed then into Jerusalem, riding on the back of a donkey. And later, of course, just a few days after that, nailed above his head on the cross will be the same declaration that the Magi gave 32 and a bit years previously. King of the Jews. And remember, the chief priests will say to Pontius Pilate, change it to say, he said he was the King of the Jews. To which Pilate replies, what scripsi, scripsi, what I have written, I have written. Consider that juxtaposition for a moment. Hailed, his birth hailed as the King of the Jews, by the Gentiles in Jerusalem, and likewise by the Gentile governor in a statement on his cross. Once more, amidst the consternation of Israel, to the consternation of those who were not worthy. And they were not worthy, as we reflected yesterday, in part because they were not looking. Surely if they were interested themselves, they'd have been poring over the scriptures and the prophecies, reading and interpreting the signs and the stars for themselves, just as the Magi had done. They would have been looking to the heavens. They would have known, surely, if they had been studying it all. But as we know, when the wise men ask, and Herod turns to them, the scribes and the Pharisees, the priests don't know anything about the prophecy. They have to dig it up. They were not worthy because they were not looking. They were not interested. They didn't care. They had gone cold. The love of God had gone cold in their hearts. And what of ourselves? As we asked ourselves yesterday, do we find, do we seek, do we search, do we look for, are we interested in knowing this Jesus, this Messiah? Will we allow Jesus, the King of the Jews, the King of Kings, to rule as King of our hearts? We prayed and sang over Christmas for Christ to be born anew within us, to enthrone him in our inner sanctums. Does Christ rule? Does he rule your head and your heart? Or are you like those Jews whose religious fervour, excuse me, whose faith has gone cold, who read the scriptures without understanding, who go through the motions of piety and devotion, but without feeling? Who claim there is a God, but they don't know him? when we read the scriptures? Do we seek enlightenment? As we read the scriptures, does the divine revelation leap out from the page at us? Do we recognize our salvation therein? When we come to Mass or hear Mass, do we simply repeat the words, perform the actions by rote? Or do we mean every Amen? Do we mean every crossing and genuflection? Do we worship with our whole self, body, mind, and spirit? And when we leave Mass, do we leave reinvigorated? Do we leave inspired? Do we leave determined, committed to fulfill our charge, our role as ambassadors of the Christ, as heralds of his kingdom, as manifestations of his love? Do we offer all that we have to his service? Do we think of him as our true King? Do we think ourselves his subjects? Do we submit ourselves to his law? As we've said before, the new year is often thought as a time for new beginnings. If we cannot answer any or all of those questions positively, truthfully, then we may thank God for yet another day to prove ourselves worthy of him, to prove ourselves grateful for salvation, to prove ourselves humble and obedient, diligent and alert servants, subjects, disciples, worthy even to be called friends of Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.